Committee meeting to order. And before we get into too awfully much, I'd like to welcome new Councillor Dunn and Councillor Fraser, if she can hear us. She may or may not. Roll call. Addition, deletions, and or approval of the agenda.
I'll move to approve the agenda.
Approved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried.
Could I just make sure that everybody has their mic on for the streaming?
So grab
Uh-oh.
you. Oh, there's two. Which was this one?
Declarations of conflict of interest. Approval of the minutes, September 17th.
I move the approval of the minutes of September the 17th.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Those against? Motion carried. Active transportation options, cycling Nova Scotia with Ethan.
So just as Ethan gets set up, I wanted to point out we've got two visitors in the audience today. We've got Danielle and Stefan. They're with Public Health. And Stefan reached out to me, and as he would be to other people working in the planning field, to talk about how public health can interface with councils and in particular with kind of built environment related things, because it's such a key indicator in public health outcomes. Do you guys want to just quickly introduce yourself while Ethan gets things set up?
My name is Stefan Fire. I joined Public Health about 3.5, 4 months ago, so getting used to the area. I'm a health promoter servicing all of Cook County. So just looking to, thank you and Scott, to just meet all the council, mayors, just learn what's going on, see how we can best work together. Our main objectives are basically anything that improves population health, is really more upstream approach. So look forward to talking to all of you in greater detail after and see if there's any way of collaborating.
Awesome.
Hi everyone, I'm Danielle McCabe, so I'm the Built Environment Coordinator with Northern Zone Public Health. So this is a new role for the Northern Zone. So basically means I'm a planner, land use planner, but I work in public health. I was hired in June, again for a new role. I was mainly hired for the Northern Zone Transportation Program. If you're aware of that program, free transportation for Northern Zone residents to and from their medical appointments, no matter where that medical appointment happens to be. And then now I'm kind of integrating more and working with communities and kind of creating that connection between the built environment and health.
You're super.
Great, thank you.
Welcome. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. I'd like to thank everyone for having me. I'll be showing a presentation to the council in this sense, kind of an intro, update, and where we're going to go in terms of this Core 18 Network project. We'll discuss how Cycling Nova Scotia and the municipality got involved in a partnership and kind of discuss the opportunities that the larger branches of government, the province and feds, are kind of looking for with municipal bodies. So tonight we'll talk a bit about the Core 18 Network project, the intro, what has kind of happened, what is the project for those who might not be as familiar, the background of it all in the provincial picture and the municipal picture, and then talking about where Cycling Nova Scotia is with the municipality in terms of its phased approach of this kind of work.
Hold on a second.
Right.
We got
All good?
just wasn't presenting on the agenda. Just wasn't presenting on that. Yes, thank you.
The other thing I was going to ask about audio, I'm just conscious of people that are watching on live stream. We get a lot of reports that they can't hear, particularly when presentations are being made. I don't know how we can do it, but Kristen, do you have do we have a mic that's available? It's one of the bugs that we have to yet work out.
Just sit in that spot.
I can stand that podium.
Yeah,
Speak
whatever.
right where-
Whatever you like.
We have to be conscious sometimes and remember that we are live streaming and people at home can't always hear properly unless we don't use our mics properly.
Alrighty, how we sounding, folks?
That's my lesson for the day.
There you go.
We lost
You coming through? Good?
Oh,
Good. Uh-oh, we come unplugged. We've come undone.
should take a second. Sorry about that.
okay.
Oh, now I got this all.
I love technology,
Sometimes it's our friend.
because I know nothing about it.
All right, I'll confirm that we're all set up live so you can read this. Perfect. Apologies for the technical issues, although I think we're no stranger in this modern era. It's just a reality. So back to the agenda, we'll discuss kind of the phased work that's been done by Nova Scotia, and now discuss how Cycling Nova Scotia, and enter in where the concept plans of this project are. That's where we then offer time for this engagement with the committee here, and what we'll be looking at doing in terms of engagement with the public moving into the next few months, and then finally discuss what those next steps are. So background into the Core Active Transportation Networks project. So the Core AT Network project is an initiative led by Cycling Nova Scotia, funded through the province's Department of Natural Resources and Renewables. The goal of this work is to help municipal units who don't necessarily have active transportation planning staff to look at developing a network for more equitable forms of getting around the community through the forms of walking, rolling, and cycling infrastructure. So part of that Core AT Networks project being funded by Department of Natural Resources is also part of the provincial government's Environmental Goals and Climate Reduction Act, specifically to address sections 9B to complete core active transportation networks in 65% of in 65% of the province's communities by 2030, and that's where a lot of our funding comes from. So through that, Cycling Nova Scotia has obtained funds to hire a full-time planner and other active transportation coordinators to help engage with municipal units across the province to develop these plans. In this funding, it also comes with the coverage of engineering to get cost estimates and perform the occasional traffic study pending the modifications to streetways, with the intention for the community to look at adopting a core active transportation network. So the minimum grid required to get communities some walking, rolling, and cycling infrastructure, with the intention for them to then adopt said network and some of the concept plans proposed. So quick background for those in the room who might not be super familiar with the term active transportation and active transportation networks. The idea is to look at developing networks on our streetscapes that allow residents to be connected to the places they want to go, that being from their home residencies to their place of work, to where they may be shopping or looking to just get to recreational facilities. The intention of an AT network is to then allow that connection and have it adopted by council. The note with that is when you develop an AT network, it's trying to function as a living document where it continuously goes through the design and approval phases to get to what's called a higher state of readiness, where we can get designs ready to be shovel-ready, or get designs to a shovel-ready state that typically helps secure funding from the higher orders of government. So Cycling Nova Scotia is an organization that works across the province with two main infrastructure style goals. One is the provincial cycling network. The idea is to have active transportation infrastructure in this provincial network connect municipal units and towns to one another. The Core AT Network project is where we go into these communities and we help them develop a core network, so the minimum grid, and help them design the infrastructure so that they can ultimately apply for some of those funding models and get that infrastructure built. Some of the really large success stories is Antigonish and Port Hawkesbury securing multi-use path corridors connecting the main parts of their town, alongside a bunch of other projects that have networks adopted and are now searching for funding opportunity. So in our role at Cycling Nova Scotia, we help develop two of the three phases to make a successful core active transportation project. The first phase, we look at visioning, prioritization, and engagement, trying to identify what the community is addressed as needing to be the core network to get around. When we enter phase 2, we look at designing, showing those designs to the community to get their initial engagement, and then end up getting usually a Class D to C costing on the project to allow decision makers the opportunity to see what this project might cost and how it might impact the community. Lastly, Cycling Nova Scotia will then hand off all the intellectual property to the municipal unit, again at no charge, so that they can look at either getting higher classifications design drawings to put them at a higher state of readiness to compete for some of those provincial and federal funds for infrastructure. So some of us might be aware that active transportation is that form just walking, rolling, and zipping around on a bike. But the main part that what we try to do here is create those designs to get the supportive infrastructure. That can look as large as those protected bike lanes to more secondary bits of infrastructure in terms of that social bit, bike racks, planters, separation of pedestrians from the roadway through painted buffers. And we use this to help make the streetscape environment more equitable and inclusive for all residents. Part of our project goals when developing this network are, the 4 fundamental goals, are to make sure that there's a core network for that equitable lens, that health lens, and making sure that the streetscape is more sustainable. We want to make sure that residents are engaged in the process. That's done through pop-ups, town halls, online surveys, and we want to connect it to the provincial Blue Route, helping those neighboring connections, recognizing that there are connections between neighboring municipalities and townships that residents can opt towards using active transportation in certain distances. And lastly, our project intends to deliver those concept plans to the municipal units to act as the foundation of developing the plans further. So one of the questions now tonight is, where are we now? So Cycling Nova Scotia has a bit of a time frame to follow. These projects do take a bit of time, usually about a year to 18 months. We started back in January 2024, where we started working with some of the municipal staff, Melanie, Scott, and Sean, to decide what the kind of goals and aspirations of the community are. We then moved into February. We reached out to the community to develop a focus group to kind of look at the core streets that would function the best for active infrastructure. And we developed a draft AT network. We then took that network through the spring and looked to engage with the public through a few engagement events. We partnered up during the transportation engagement event with the bus pilot project and did some pop-ups where we came to the community to show them some of the designs to get their feedback on the network plan, the network routes. That led to producing some of the engagement reports where we captured a lot of feedback about what the community was looking at. Concerns are raised about vehicle speeds, not being able to get around based on the quality of infrastructure in certain areas. And we ultimately asked them what would be some of the priority routes of the network we had proposed to them during the engagement. And finally, with all those results, we went back to the focus group and kind of did a scoring matrix to evaluate what would be the priority if the community adopts both the network and which route would make the most sense to target the costing and designs for into phase 2. Today kind of marks the start of phase 2, where we've developed a set of concept plans. These are considered 30% drawings, so they're highly amendable. They're not to be the concrete application, but they are set to allow the community to have a conceptual idea of where sidewalk implementations, bike lanes, curb extensions might go, and gives us time to receive feedback on these designs and see what modifications should be made at this stage before locking down any commitments. The idea is here, moving into the start of winter, we follow up with some more engagement events before we do some engineering costing of the project and looking at traffic studies of any major design interventions we have suggested. Finally, entering the last stage of that in phase 3, we produce a final report with that costing for council to look at and the designs. So In these designs, we will talk a bit about the nuance tonight, but look at what a traffic study at one of the intersection design interventions look like and how we'd present that to council, so they're not just looking at some nice illustrations, but understand there is feasibility to these projects. So in front of all of you tonight, there is some examples, or there is a booklet that is provided to you just to offer some more detail, recognizing a screen can only take us so far. But on the left, or on the first page of the booklet, you will see the core AT network as solidified through the community engagement stage with 3 primary routes making the core of the network. Cycling Nova Scotia and also the province here do recommend that these networks get expanded over time, but this plan functions as the goals in the short term for the community to look towards. On the top right of the screen here, this is pulled directly from our engagement report, showing from our survey respondents the priorities of which these routes should or would be considered constructed, with the Main Street being the highest priority by residents to having more active transportation infrastructure options, followed by Route 3 in yellow, which is Drummond Road and some of the side residential streets. Tonight offers a snapshot. In that document, there is a QR code to everyone who has it to look at the full exploded view for each of the streets flagged, but we will look at the most important sections of these routes, which will give the committee here some chance to offer feedback on the main concerns. The rest of the routes mirror each of these sections. But we will go through each of the routes. I will give opportunity for the committee to ask me some questions mid-presentation, and I will ask that some of my questions might be answered as we go through them, though. So Route 1, if you can refer to the map, is Main Street. And Cycling Nova Scotia has produced 2 concept options. One would be looking at bidirectional bike lanes across the majority of the route, with curb extensions to offer some traffic calming options. There is also a recommendation to look at the intersection between South Main Street and North Main Street and turn it from a Y intersection into a more standardized T intersection, slowing down vehicles turning in that area and offering a greater design decision that prioritizes AT users. On the document, you'll see 2 reference images on how the community could go about this. The larger of the images shows what a painted intervention would look like. This would allow the community at a very low cost to look at implementing a T intersection at this intersection without impacting vehicular traffic, but starting to show the prioritization to AT users and calming traffic in the area. In the smaller image there, you do see what a permanent option would look like with a curb, a raised curb, but this is with what's called a truck apron. One of the comments we got a bit with this intersection internally was understanding that this is a truck route with some larger vehicles. A turn apron at this design would allow those large vehicles to still ride over the curve, but allowing smaller recreational vehicles or recommend then to recreational or personal vehicles to treat it like a traditional T intersection, and then prioritize that curb extension to prevent encroachment to those trying to cross as a pedestrian. The rest of the route looks at what a tactical intervention bike lane would look like. That would be a painted buffer with precast concrete, so that would require no ripping up of the asphalt in this area, and would allow the community to look at a medium range pilot of what a bike lane through the main street looks like. That would then allow the community, as capitalization projects come about, to either look at more permanent options like raised bike lanes or solidify casting concrete down the road. Lastly, there's an example on this option 1 here of painted curb extensions. This is another interim option where if council would like to pilot some of these designs, this doesn't affect the asphalt streetscape and allows the community to look at either 3-season or 4-season painting and buffering to allow pedestrians a shorter cross distance. So rather than having to cross 4 lanes, 2 parking lanes and 2 travel lanes, they would then have only the space to have to traverse 2 travel lanes. So break down some of the designs back again here. There are tactical options where you use planters and flex bollards in a painted element to pilot these projects at a very low cost, but also be eligible to secure larger funding models, whether that's from the province or feds. And then the more permanent option, which those two funders do tend to favor, would be that truck apron option. To the buffered bike lane portion, this is a model of what Halifax has. We're recommending a width of 1.5 for the AT travel lane, with the buffer being 30 centimeters, getting you that 1.8. This is an example. Different municipal units can vary these designs. They might choose to have flex bollards or not, but this allows the ability for parking adjacent to it to allow doors to be opened while protecting those AT users. And lastly, I spoke about those curb extensions. So they can be done in two forms, the 3-season or 4-season painted examples to allow those pedestrians more visibility. And when capitalization projects open up, you could look at the permanent ones that can be extensions for either green space or even commercial space, pending how the community wants to go about this. Option 2 looks at what's called a bi-directional bike lane. So it's a little less encroachment on the travel lane widths for vehicles because it allows the AT facility to buddy up with the two directions. So the AT users are only set to one side of the streetscape and allows for some riding in terms like two abreast, larger AT devices, with less impact on that with the curb to curb. In this illustration, there's also a few more examples of how curb extensions function. One example we talked about with the inclusion of the bus route through the community is these curb extensions can also act as bus stops that help with those walking users access their buses. I would flag in projects like this, the province is quite interested when there's a multimodal aspect. So when you can incorporate elements like curb extensions to get people from transit to walking, there is a point hierarchy there. And lastly, on the right, you see what that bidirectional looks like in the tactical realm. So similar to that bike lane I showed with those flex bollards and cast concrete, you can pilot this type of design and do it in an interim fashion to allow the community to figure out if the design works for them in that midterm and commit to it later down as capitalization projects open up. So here's that illustration once again. The larger image is what that bidirectional looks like. It does offer a bit more AAA accessibility, and we do see users of varying ages prefer this with the greater space, understanding that right now in Nova Scotia the demand for this is in the interim, so they can use a lot of the double wide bike lane in this sense to safely get around with their, in this example, their little ones, but in general giving them a bit more priority of the space. And then this is an example of how those curb extensions can look. Curb extensions, again, can benefit your other infrastructure elements like bus stops, or can be used as beautification projects. We see communities use the patio-style curb extension to slow vehicular traffic and give back a bit to the community, some retail space and beautification space of your main drags. Option 2 here, if you refer back to the map, is on sorry, I'm forgetting the street name here, Spring Garden Road, my apologies. The main point of this illustration here is to discuss with the committee some options for traffic calming. During our first phase, we heard a lot of asks to calm traffic, especially knowing that there's a school in this area. The top 3 illustrations on this map indicate 3 styles of traffic calming options. We'll break them down in the next slide and also discuss how this can become a AT corridor through the indication of Sharrows. By offering some of these traffic calming measures, we can alleviate some traffic or move away some of the vehicular traffic demand on this street and prioritize those AT users who are just using the street as a complete AT kind of corridor. So on this screen, I would invite the committee to comment on a few of these. There are 3 kind of options for a residential street like this that can slow down traffic. The most common we see in Nova Scotia are speed humps. They're those larger style speed bumps that slows cars down to more of a natural 30 kilometers an hour. It does come with some cons, like we get a little bit of pushback occasionally from fire services, as it also slows down emergency vehicles. The second option you see on screen is chicanes. These are used where they're typically put in a park lane, but require vehicles to have to, in a sense, swerve around, naturally creating a need to be slower in the area. They function quite well on streets that already have some on-street parking, as vehicles naturally do chicane, but this creates a more permanent element and allows for consistent traffic demand management. And the third option are speed cushions. These are preferred typically by emergency services because they're only the width to slow down more consumer vehicles. Fire trucks and ambulances have a wheelbase that's wider and allows those larger vehicles to get through without being affected by this speed calming measure, but then does get some pushback from snow clearing crews because of the inconsistency from the curb to curb. Option 2 on the street looks at a hybrid kind of bike lane option. This includes an advisory shoulder. So this is a dashed or symbolic kind of infrastructure, creating physical space prioritization for those who would be walking or rolling on the existing curb to curb or the asphalts. Seeing that Spring Garden is has a sidewalk already, this would then be to prioritize those who are cycling, with the intention to allow vehicles to see the space that they're required to give, that 1.5 meters through the Motor Vehicle Act, but doing it through line delineation to add some passive enforcement in the area. Again, we do recommend speed cushions in this example to still slow down vehicle speeds, seeing that in this design we are trying to recommend AT users use Spring Garden over like Cohen Street. And with that connection to the school, make it a safer space for maybe the little ones who are trying to get around. I do have one final bit to note on this illustration. There's an RFB, or a rectangular flashing beacon, that we would suggest by the school. This is just to help with visibility at busy intersections with high pedestrian crossing numbers. And this functions to signalize to drivers through the flashing LEDs that there is someone trying to cross. So these illustrations just expand a bit of those design interventions we suggested. Those flashing beacons can be installed practically anywhere within the town or the municipal boundaries, and they are agreed upon by some of the tax standards at the engineering level in the province. And in the bottom here we have the advisory shoulders. Again, it functions as a formal separation. It isn't separated, but it helps vehicles delineate the required space they're to give of AT users on the road surface. Lastly, I'm going to go through option 3 here. There's a lot to cover in this. So again, with that QR code in your document, you can zoom out and see a lot of the nuances to this design on your own time. And again, I'll always be welcome. And of course, our municipal partners, Melanie and Sean, are fantastic to also walking through some of these designs. But there's a few options. Looking at Elm Street, once again, we recommend the advisory shoulders. Seeing that the existing curb to curb is quite narrow, this allows that space dedication to AT users while still allowing vehicles their bi-directional traffic flow, but understanding and recognizing that this is now an AT priority area. In this design, we also see the recommendation of a multi-use path on Drummond Road. This is a big comment on this area, is there's some narrow curb-to-curb widths at the start, and once we get past even this building, it does widen where a multi-use path could go all the way to the municipal limit or the boundary, and allowing a completely separated AT connection for users into the core of the community while connecting to some of those destinations in Stellarton that was flagged through multiple sections of both the focus group and the engagement reports, making that community connection a bit better. There has been also some consultation with the Stellarton AT plan. We'll get into that in option 2, but making sure that if this was to go through in the community, that there is some design options considered to help connect with their active transportation plan. So the benefits of a multi-use path is a completely separated facility, so it keeps your AT users away from vehicle traffic. Some of the nuanced cons to this is differing AT user groups, so those walking are still at conflict with some cyclists, as there is a bit of a speed discrepancy there, but usually you can alleviate that with the width of the multi-use path. It's typically recommended at a minimum of 3 meters and at the lower end 2.7. Seeing that there is a lot of width in the right-of-way of the community's road here, you could achieve 3 up to 3.5 in the area. And the other option on screen here again is those advisory shoulders. Again, allows for vehicle traffic to continue on that road, but reinforces that 1.5 minimum requirement when passing those AT users on the existing asphalt. Option 2 looks at Drummond Road with a slight variation, and that would be looking at widening the road to allow for bike lanes. This is a bit of that communication point with Stellarton. Their intention for Drummond Road on their side of the municipal boundaries is a bidirectional bike lane until it ends. So this would be the connection to mirror some of their design and allow for a consistent connection from Westville to Stellarton. It does require then widening in the road, and again, back in the residential area, it does narrow, so you would be looking at costs associated with moving utility poles, but there would be then a recommendation as well in that section to upgrade some of the sidewalk as that opportunity arises. So to emphasize some of that design, there are 2 kind of styles of doing that. One would just be that unidirectional bike lane with the painted bit. If the community looks at larger capital projects, they could be looking at raised bike lanes if they were to look at repaving and designing that road that offers a rollover curb, so it still allows emergency vehicles full access, but creates some separation between those AT users and reduces the impact that vehicular traffic might have on that bit of infrastructure. And so that is the summary of the routes. I'll pause here if there's some pressing questions that I can address with the slides. If not, I'll happily continue.
One little question about that connection to Stellarton you mentioned with the multi-use.
Yeah.
Like separated multi-uses. There is a connection to the parkway that way. But when we would get to this municipal boundary, in that case, then we would be entering a bi-directional highway.
Yeah, that would be correct. Typically, the design approach there would to look at one of those RRFB, the reflective rectangular flashing beacons, to have your AT users cross there. The intention is in the future that with the amendments to the Motor Vehicle Act, something called cross rides would be implemented, and that's where you could request at those lights a more that vehicles yield and AT users wouldn't have to dismount, but that's not there, so we'd be recommending a dismount style until the Motor Vehicle Act gets updated. All right, I will continue. So our next steps are to look at showing these designs for the kind of first round of engagement with the community, get their feedback on some of the design options. It's one thing to get their feedback in the phase 1 of the network. It's the next to make sure that this is reflective of some of their requests in terms of separation. The separation is perceived safe, is safe, feels safe, and modified designs based off of those rounds of engagement so that we have a refined design that goes to council for their final decision. So this is planned to do through some pop-up engagement as well and look at doing some online feedback into the new year. And then so those last steps are, again, amend the designs based off the community feedback. And once those designs are amended, that's where Cycling Nova Scotia goes to obtain those Class D cost estimates. So council understands how each section of the network costs and how that costing can be implemented in both their budgeting and how that costing allows them to have a higher state of readiness in terms of looking at some of the funding opportunities that, again, the province and feds have opened up in the past and are continuing to open up to get more detailed designs and cost share a lot of these projects. And then once those designs are finalized through turn studies of like intersections and the costing, that's when we present our final package to council with the intention at the minimum to adopt the network and the goal of having the concept plans adopted as well. And lastly, we then give the package to the municipal staff to then explore the future opportunities of getting this infrastructure developed. And this leads me off my last slide of just, now I'm happy to take any questions.
Mr. Chair, through you to, yes, when you mentioned pop-up engagement, can you just explain what pop-up engagements would look like?
Yeah, so the past pop-up engagement we've done is we joined up with craft fairs or just popped up at like the mayor's ice cream social. The intention is planners aren't requesting the community to come to them, but kind of come, the planners go to the community so that they're not working for these designs. We're in a sense trying to work to get their input without a large burden on them to show up.
Right. So the next social event in town is the Christmas concert that'll be on the 5th of December. So there will be people there. It's usually a large turnout. Not all citizens are, not all people there are from town, but I think that we're probably going to get some input from people outside of town as well on this whole thing, because they're going to be users as well. We have a lot of citizens that live in the periphery of town that use our town for lots of reasons. So I don't think it hurts to engage them as well. If I'm correct in that assumption, you know, it's
No,
not
that would
bad.
be fantastic.
Yeah.
Westville is in a strong opportunity, or with like the general area. Pictou, New Glasgow, and Stellarton all have, or Pictou's working on their AT plan. New Glasgow has adopted one, and we are, for example, currently working on some of their designs. And Stellarton has adopted an AT plan, but I believe it's on pause right now as they're have some staff turnover in terms of the planning and rec department.
So they're at what stage? So Stellarton is on the stages that you just mentioned there. They're a little ahead of where we are at this point in time. Then they've adopted a plan
Yes,
design?
Stellarton has adopted a network
Okay.
with some concept plans.
Right.
They haven't gone through with getting more detailed designs.
Right.
The nuance to this project is the province and the federal government are very interested in communities who can get all the way up to detailed designs, so the 90% drawings or the construction ready.
Okay.
And typically those are the communities we see win funding or cost sharing funding programs or
Yes.
grants. The past example I'd like council to know is in 2022, the federal AT fund opened up and they were cost sharing with municipal bodies 74% of all infrastructure costs of AT related infrastructure. With the concept there is the community or the municipal unit only has to bring 26 cents to the dollar on those projects. So a large savings to get some capital projects in. Those projects are also opportune to address more than just AT as long as there's separated facilities. So when you're not looking at separated infrastructure like a protected bike lane, then the project loses some of this eligibility status. So the intention from those two governments is to show there is a movement towards more equitable protected infrastructure.
So the funding that may be available is going to be dictated somewhat by the design that we establish or agree upon.
Yes, so the last AT fund, if a community didn't have a project like this at a concept stage, we're eligible for $50,000 to consult out to consultants.
Yeah.
And if they had plans, that's where they would be offered that up to 74% infrastructure cost sharing. So that would be getting to the class B level.
That 74%, is that federal money?
That the last example was federal money, yes.
So is it stackable?
I
If we were to
don't have
find
it-
other sources of funding that would be applicable?
I don't believe the federal one was, but I do know the province, and back to why we get funding from them, is interested in doing stackable with other smaller federal grants.
Right.
So an example, this is a very small stream, would be called the Connect 2 Fund. So
Right.
a municipal
Yes.
entity would be looking at, like a 30%, and then the province takes another, and then they would approach the feds if it was a large project. Or on the other hand, if you had a network already, lots of AT grants have opened up where if it's like a $50,000 project, they would just green light it with no questions.
Right. Yeah, no, appreciate it.
The other thing I think, just to add, I believe you're coming to the craft sale, aren't you?
Yes, we
Oh,
will-
that's right, yes, we have a craft
yeah,
sale happening, this weekend,
That's
right?
right,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that's the first one, yeah.
So, but, you know.
That'll be an excellent
they
opportunity.
could come at on the December 5th.
The craft sale actually, because it's there's more in and out, people traveling or coming in, going, as opposed to the concert where people will be coming in and seating and then leaving sort of thing. So the craft fair is a good one, yes, absolutely.
Just a comment. Thank you very much for your presentation tonight. It was excellent. Looking at these pictures, they look amazing. They give us a lot of hope and ideas, and seeing them laid out with our streets just really quite exciting. I guess for me, it's easy for me to go through and kind of pick like my personal preferences of what I think would work and what I think looks best or would be best for the citizens here. I think what it comes down to is just kind of getting an idea of a ballpark number of the cost of what that would look like, and then what we would have to bring to the town, like we would have to bring to the table from the town. So yeah, I guess that would be our next step, is figuring out what we'd have to choose in order to be eligible for the grants, and then what our end of it would be on a financial budget.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we're very much agree. One of the hard parts of this stage is the balancing act of costing to just figuring out what the community's priorities are.
Right.
We do know the network priorities, but the next step is how people want to interact with this infrastructure. One of the reasons we would like to do that through the cost after stage is there is precedent where if the community doesn't want to look at, let's say, strong dedicated separation, we can make a case in those applications where painted is just enough, but as long as we gauge and get community feedback. Examples to that as well is sometimes communities are walking communities and aren't as interested in cycling infrastructure. Again, those funders typically want to see a larger berth of what AT stands for, so that cycling component. But as long as those communities do the work and the proof that walking infrastructure needs to be the most advanced, then they become eligible in a sense again through the strong engagement lens.
Okay, that's really good to know. We do have a lot of sidewalks that are in rough shape.
Yeah, and there's particular areas of town where probably right now, if you were to do a count or whatever, that you'd find there's far more walkers than there are, bikers or whatever. Maybe they're not biking because it's just, not suitable. But there are areas in town I know where, a lot of people have their route that they walk. You see it all the time. And a lot of those places are unsafe, in my opinion. I see them going by my house. I live in Cowan, and it's
There are no sidewalks.
It's a very unsafe sort of walking area for sure.
This is absolutely a great spot for in these projects. If we see like sections with existing infrastructure that are in like disrepair, we do flag that. So part of our costing is looking at that full street, flagging areas that need improvement. So if sidewalks are noted, or we will get that costed in part of that project. And we typically get the costing per street, per section, so that is broken down by line item of sidewalk, bike lane, etc.
Right, yeah.
The last thing I will say is that this is fantastic information for us to have as a planning advisory committee and as a council, regardless of the active transportation, or I should say, in addition to the active transportation aspect of it, just in streetscapes and in intersections that we know have been issues for a long time. The one down on Main and going on to Church and then that around the Need store and so on is, people, it's a very confusing intersection. I don't know if I can put it any differently than that. But, even those suggestions are, I think, valuable to us going ahead.
I would add, so trying, as in my attempt to still be brief to the council, there are 2 engagement reports part of phase 1. Actually 3, one's more of an appendix of all the survey results. I would recommend it's on our Blue Route website, and it's open to the public,
Right.
and that shows the process in which we went about engagement and breaks down the focus groups, the decisions, the fact that we looked at the topography in the area, the destinations that were often flagged, to be part of like council's ability to have supplementary resources on their decisions. So I do recommend you look at some of those reports, and it'll give you some insight of what was flagged throughout this process.
Just a question. Could you tell me now, I know it was on the first slide, I believe, how many people have completed the survey so far?
I can't remember off my hand. I do
Okay.
apologize.
Yeah.
It does say in the report, though,
Okay.
not statistically significant, though
Yeah.
I don't know too many planners who've achieved statistical significant
Right.
surveys. But I would again recommend you look at, we have a visual guide at the survey report options. It's a really brief one on our site that you could look at, which indicates the numbers.
Right, and along with this, I think we could tie in some accessibility issues. Like I know there's some there are some citizens in Westville that have accessibility issues and needs, and because of the roads and sidewalk conditions, aren't able to get out and about and walk and get the exercise that they need outside of their homes. So maybe there's another grant or something else that we could tie in with that. In order to help out some, I'm thinking of a specific woman that has cerebral palsy and is struggling and lived in a different town where she had access to sidewalks and now unfortunately doesn't. So if there was something we could,
There also is an additional resource council could look at, and there is precedent in the province. There's something called the NACTO design standards, and some municipal units, example HRAM, who's kind of leading it in the province, adopted this so that any future construction projects are to those accessibility and AT standards.
Right.
By adopting that as well, this is my hint to council is that's another bit of supplementary proof that a municipal unit is looking at adding to their AT kind of planning strategy, making some of those funding opportunities more obtainable.
I think you'll get more feedback now when these sort of concept, the routes, design and suggestions that are are contained in this document. Once this becomes more public to residents of our town, and once they are actually to see it, the next go round of engagements, I would anticipate there will be more engagement.
I very much agree with you. As a designer of that, I get a lot of opinion pieces. So I am very eager to hear what the residents of Westville have to say on these, and then bring that back to council.
great.
Ethan, can I ask just a quick question about the bollards? So in your presentation, the bollards were associated with precast curbing. Do they ever just appear as bollards?
They do.
And does that count then as real separation?
Yes. Yes. HRM has done it on some of their very narrow streets. The benefit, again, so on this example image here, they are attached to the precast, but they can be attached directly to the asphalt. HRM uses them, and their public works crew does the installation themselves. They consider them at times 3-season, where if the street is too narrow for snow clearing equipment, they'll remove them.
Next question.
But once the anchors are set in the asphalt, your public works crews can reinstall them the next season with minimal invasion. There's the occasional bits of rust and oxidation, but it's something local public works crews can do. I would also like council to know that HRM's public works crew has indicated to Cycling Nova Scotia that they have interest of also teaching other municipal public works crews the installation of these types of infrastructure, just through their own personal or their own community kind of goals of helping Nova Scotia have more equitable transportation options.
Great, thank you.
Ethan, a two-part question. Do you see any advantage in maybe putting up some signage on the identified routes, just saying this route has been identified as a priority active transportation route, just to sort of get people to start thinking about this?
I've seen mixed reviews across the province. Some municipal units have seen success by indicating route preferences through like a walking corridor and building support. Others have been led down the route of they see signage but no usage and sometimes get pushback. So I can't answer in a nice and simple yes or no. There can be value to again indicating AT corridors, so saying a bike route signage, for example, that allows vehicles that education piece. Your community already has some share the road signage, which I'm very glad to see when I drive in. But beyond that, we don't see too much success unless there's actual infrastructure.
Okay. And picking up on the mayor's comment about raising awareness, have you seen municipalities do kind of, not pop-ups, but kind of tactical urbanist sort of approaches to quick things that raise awareness about cycling, utility cycling basically, getting people out, not just going for a fun cycle, but actually going to work, going to school?
Absolutely. A great example is New Glasgow. They have a bike bus program. So their MPAL leads this, and they ride as a large group of young little ones through the community in a pack of 30, 40, 50 at times. They take up the whole street. So I know some authorities might not like it. It does raise a lot of awareness. And New Glasgow's program has seen so much success during the warmer months. They do pause for winter just through the reality of ice and liability, that the parents have raised interest in more AT infrastructure based off of how eager their kids have. And I really like this one note that was raised. We had a bike summit in New Glasgow. The parents were more excited to have their kids be more independent on the roads, because of the confidence built during the bike bus program, and were more interested in helping or allowing their kids more independence in the community just naturally through that learning lens.
Do you see Cycle Nova Scotia developing kind of a web resource that talks about these kinds of programs, or?
I do see that. There are a bunch of institutions who do kind of push this kind of stuff. Ecology Action Center is one. They help do a lot of learning to ride. They also have an interesting program called the Pop-Up Bike Hub, where they come to community with a free repair shed for a few days and help those who might not have access to a local bike shop, or just through the equity lens maybe can't afford it but get them repaired. On the other hand, Cycling Nova Scotia offers a few resources. It's more on the extreme spectrums. There are some clubs we offer, and then we offer also what's called the Hop On program, where in the summer we offer staff who teach kids how to ride, and part of that training includes the rules of the road and how to ride. But then again, there's also the risk that sometimes our roads aren't safe for our smaller ones, so that's where that emphasis of infrastructure comes in.
So I guess I'm just wondering if there could be like a single source that would collect this from different groups and say, if you're looking at this, go here. If you're looking at this, go here. Because otherwise people, they're not even going to start if it's scattered all over the place.
I do get that. We offer a bit on the Cycling Nova Scotia website, but again, the sporadicness is always a project to work on. I can't speak too much to the levels of that being worked on beyond that. I know a lot of cross organizations are interested in what you're asking for, Sean, but I can't speak to a yes yet.
I bet public health is going to pick up on this, right? Like,
Yes. Good timing that they're here.
I have one more question with regards to like the infrastructure funding models and grants available, because I think with the amount of cycling that I do see in town, it is going to be a 3-season solution for most people. Is there a detriment to those applications for funding if it is based on a 3-season model, or is it just as viable, more viable? Because it would, in my
Parts of
opinion,
Nova Scotia
reduce costs
aren't
on the
3-season.
town if it wasn't going to be funded to have more painted and temporary solutions.
It does seem to be viable with the 3-season options. Again, these pools kind of run through like a competitiveness of who's the most ready or who has the most dedicated infrastructure. So there's always the advantage of proposing like 4-season protected separated infrastructure, but the 3-season hasn't removed eligibility for those applications.
I got just a couple quick questions there, Mr. Chair. First one is around just structured feedback as opposed to the pop-ups. Like, I understand the pop-up concept, and I think that's great. But my concern is some of those engagements are just by chance that folks just happen to be there, and you might get to speak to the right group at the right time. So and I did note that you said about the engagement reports, which I'll most certainly take a look at. Would we ever have a public engagement more broadly announced to the public about it? Because I know we're talking very positive here, and I will keep my comments positive. I'm sure you know in your line of work there's a lot of adversity to sometimes this when it comes to rural communities in particular, and it's kind of a two-part question. It's about the engagement, but then it's about the demonstrating. Is there a requirement to demonstrate? And I don't want to use the word need, because I know it's, you build it, they'll come. It's not so much is there a need, but do the grants require any kind of data to demonstrate, hey, this is the town of Westville, there's 10 people that use bikes in the town on a regular basis, as opposed to, we know through a study or a survey, there's actually 150. The 10 that we see are just the 10 that we hear going up and down the roads in particular. So I guess the question is, would we have more engagement? Is there any requirement for data to, access some of those grants? So that's my first two parts. So I'll let you answer that, and then I have one other question in relation to that.
Perfect. So for the first phase, we also did an online survey that was shared both by Cycling Nova Scotia's 2 pages, the Cycling Nova Scotia, the Blue Route, and through Westville's recreation page. So that's where we secured a large portion of our survey responses. Again, I apologize, I don't remember the number offhand. It's in the engagement report. But we did do that bit of opportunity to engage outside of just their pop-ups and that town hall-esque style with the transit. Moving forward with these designs, we'd like to do that through the end of this year and the new year of these designs online as well, to offer the community the opportunity to comment in a sense, a candid space without, I think the point you're trying to raise is like we're not cherry picking results.
No, and I didn't figure that you were by any stretch. Just know the community, know their love for engagement, and sometimes it's better to have it up front and not when we're painting lines on the road or installing bollards and things of that nature. So just trying to get ahead of it. This is actually council's very kind of first get together in this fashion. So obviously we still have to talk about our priorities and strategic plan and all that fun stuff. Haven't got there yet. Active transit will certainly was on the last one. I know it'll be near the top in this one as well. The second kind of question I have is there, I think I know some of the answer, but is there a reason that there's a glaring omission utilizing any element of Acadia Park in any of this active transit? Like, this is all just utilizing existing streets and infrastructure that's already there, and I'm just wondering if there's any reason that we wouldn't look at utilizing some of Acadia Park in the future for some of this, just to maybe leverage some of those concerns that we know will come from from the town folks when we start eliminating parking spaces on Main Street, which again is not uncommon. I'm sure it's not an uncommon discussion in municipal units when this gets presented. So I guess, yeah, that's my question is why haven't we looked at Acadia Park as well?
So there, at the early stages in the focus group, there was some conversation about it, and again, some of the engagement did mention it. The big push is to make sure these AT networks address more of the residential kind of connection to the work and where people shop.
Right.
If it errs towards just recreation, that enters in new kind of grant categories where you're looking at Parks and Rec grants, or you're looking at like health grants. That doesn't allow for those larger improvements of separated infrastructure. That existing curb to curb kind of right away is where we see a lot better connectivity to the places people say they would like to go for work, shopping, not recreation, and where they live. So. It mirrors a lot of why our roads are built in a certain way to get people to where they want to go. And we try to echo that through the AT design of getting people to their destinations through a direct fashion.
That makes total sense. And I think of it in a smaller context too, like if you were to get to the middle of town through Acadia Park, you're probably within 200 meters either way of every business within the town, right? Like, that's the only thing, but I understand the concept of exactly bigger thing, why those would be the rules, right? So that makes sense.
I would like the committee to know that, again, at this stage, we can amend design. So during that feedback we get, if we do see something quite or rather large, where like a point like that's raised, this is the time where we can amend. Once you start looking at designs at that 60% or those Class C and those 90% Class B, that's where it's harder for you to get cost-effective changes or amendments. At that point, your engineers are surveying and are committing to hard costs.
No, awesome, thank you.
So on that, if you ever happen to be out in Calgary, they've got hundreds of kilometers of bike routes throughout the city. But a lot of them are really interesting because they'll go down trails and then pop out on roads for a bit and then pop back onto trails. And so they really use whatever means they can to get people to move around the city in a meaningful way, like destination-oriented rather than recreation-oriented cycling or walking. And I know when I leave here and run downtown on my bike to go to lunch, I peel through Acadia Park. There's that little thing by the electrical station there. And that, the pea gravel's a bit dodgy, but it's a great way to get downtown. And then I go out on a place that we don't own, but hopefully we will get someday, because that is just a natural place to exit onto Main Street. And so I think that as an AT system gets more robust, we'll find all kinds of little shortcuts and trails and things like that that can augment the kind of the core system.
Yeah. And those were the routes that were in my head as we were talking, the parallels that are already existing just off the street. So, no, that's awesome.
Any more questions? No? Okay.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, that is everything. I really appreciate your time. I don't think that document or handout I gave you has my email, but I will ask John to share that. And again, we're always excited for the feedback from all levels on this. So again, please feel free to mark up those documents I've handed out, or email me any questions, comments, concerns, or of course your own municipal staff who've done a fantastic job. Again, Mel, Scott, and Sean have been fantastic throughout the project.
Well, thank you, Ethan. That was an excellent presentation, so, yeah, no, good stuff.
Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yes. Number 7 is being planning development report. Sean, you have information on that?
We did? Okay, cool. All right. I got this out a little bit earlier than normal. Not much, but a little bit. So I'm not going to dive through all of it, just wanted to highlight a couple of points as always. On the new building and development permits, one of those was one I noticed a building show up that didn't have a permit, so we chased them down and we got them to get a permit. I'm not going to go into details on it, but there was a bit of shock that we would bother them in that way. And it got sorted out and everyone's friends again, so that's excellent.
Are you able to elaborate what street in particular?
You can ask me later.
Okay.
We've got a new mini home that went in. That's a municipal housing home that's meant for affordable housing, so that's going in Cowan Place. And we've got the semi-detached dwelling permit for the Stones buildings up on Truro, the first of the two. And so I think that will be probably the first new semi-detached building to go up in Westville, maybe ever. Maybe it's been like 60, 70 years before they were built. So that's a couple of the new things. And we are, of course, getting into this part of the year, we're slowing down in terms of applications, which is to be expected. It's kind of moving more into the planning phase and less about getting the buildings built.
Can I just ask quickly, the lot down here that was sold on Drummond?
Yes.
Nothing is happening there as of yet. I'm guessing there was a time frame attached to that sale? That
So
something had
it's
to
actually,
happen within a time frame?
there's a couple of references in the report to that lot. What has happened there is there's been a subdivision consolidation where the new owners of that small lot also own the little 2-unit next door across the other side of the brook.
Okay.
And so the boundary line has changed to expand the size of 1963 Drummond.
Okay.
And there's an application, site plan approval application that you will have seen in here for a quad, a 4-unit.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's gone out to the public in case there is anyone who wishes to appeal that. I think we're probably getting close to the end of the appeal period, and so barring anything coming in, they will be applying for a building permit in the next while.
Yeah. I couldn't recall when it was sold, so I couldn't get the time frame right in my head.
Yeah, the time frame is 2 years.
Okay.
And they are well within that.
Absolutely,
So I think we probably sold it less than 12 months ago.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
I thought we were coming up to the year, and I didn't know if it was 2 years or a year.
Yeah,
but
you're
it's
probably
2
right,
years.
Mayor. I can't remember exactly the date either, but it's probably been 8 months or so. But I do know that the owners have, worked with Sean on a number of different occasions during that period of time.
It sounds like it's going in the right direction.
Yeah,
It's
so I
actually
think-
an
I think-
improvement over what was proposed, really, it sounds like.
Well, we're getting more
Getting
in
more.
that space than we
Exactly.
would have otherwise, had they
Exactly.
not had that extra land that they
Right.
were able to contribute.
Right,
Yeah.
so
So
more
it's really a
density.
net benefit, I think.
That's right, yes, exactly. Well, that's good news.
I didn't see a reference to the units down at the end of North Main Street. The other one is under construction now, down where
So
Railroad Bridge is.
you're talking about there's 2 duplexes,
Yeah.
one of them's complete and people
Yep.
are living in it. The permit that was issued for the first one included the second one as well.
Okay.
So it was all done at the same time.
About that.
As soon as we start, actually, I'd got it in my notes to talk to the inspector to make sure he is getting up there and he's getting
Right.
calls. Because I haven't seen anything from him on inspections on that, so. We had a few other points that came up in here, like 1980 Drummond, there's an auxiliary dwelling unit going in there. And some of the notes were unclear to me, so I'm working on getting clarification on those. It's the time of year when we want to close up these permits that are open still, because otherwise they don't get on the tax roll. They,
Right.
linger for another year. And so I'm kind of beating the bushes, so to speak, trying to find anything that really should be closed. We had, I had some conversations with the owner of a building who is doing it's listed as a comprehensive residential renovation on Campbell's Road. And for reasons I won't get into right now, he was having some reservations, but we talked through it. And now we're talking about possibly doing some subdivision of that lot. It's quite a long lot. And depending on which way we go with it, there may be quite a few more units going in there in addition to the older structure being renovated. So that will be a real boon to that area. We do have to think about how to get sewer to the furthest one along the lot because that part of Campbell's Road falls off fairly significantly. So I was out with Public Works just today, actually, talking about what we could do there. 1963 Drummond was a very small lot, and I did a conceptual design for a 16-foot wide by 2-story high building. And I just gave that to people, and now there's one of them being built, and that will go on the Duff Run lot. And so it's under construction as a module build right now. So it's being built in the shop, and it will just sort of show up. And all of a sudden, there'll be a building there.
Excellent.
Some of these I'll mention, Scott, and if you want to just jump on them, getting into residential projects. So there's a company out of Ontario called Do Build, who we've been talking to quite a lot, and you've probably already heard about this in previous meetings. They're very interested in a large lot on Spring Garden. I don't know, I guess they're doing due diligence right now, but they've given direction that they want to acquire that and do a pretty substantial development, but I haven't had any detail on that at this point.
What street did you reference?
Spring Garden.
Spring Garden.
Yeah, so it's
I think
down
it's-
close to the Legion area.
Yes.
And so they're, I don't know that that they've actually purchased the lot, but they're, I think as Mr. Day is saying, they're doing their due diligence. And, as recently as a couple of weeks ago, we're in my, I had a conversation with them and they still seem to be interested. But, you know, due diligence is due diligence, and it takes a while, and there's no guarantees that, you know, you may get partway through that process and realize, oops, there's costs or concerns that, you know, we hadn't noticed before. So it's a little hard, you know, it's hard, maybe impossible to tell at this stage whether that'll come to fruition or not.
I didn't know that was the company name. I know who you're referencing, but I
Right.
didn't realize that was the company
Yeah.
name.
What is the local
Do Bill.
connection?
Yeah.
The local connection says Do Build has a local connection with Westville?
What's his name?
They
Yeah,
were,
there
they
is-
were referred to Westville by another company, basically.
Yeah.
They made an inquiry, as I understand it.
Yeah, one of the people involved
Design company.
has rental properties in the Pictou County area
Oh, okay.
and likes the Pictou County area and wants to do more of that sort of activity in the Pictou County area. And Westville seems to be a place that he's taken a particular shine to, and so they're looking
Yeah.
to develop. if
As
they
I
can.
recall, the design company that he was working with, when he suggested that, or indicated he was looking for additional builds, that they suggested Westville.
Okay.
Which is, you know, good to hear that other people are sending us
Yeah.
possible development people. And, yeah, so we'll see where it goes.
On the expansion of the community group home living one, that actually shows up elsewhere in this report as well. There's a fairly tight timeline on that project, but they're realizing the capacity of the land they have is pretty substantial. So actually, even just today, I had a meeting with them, and we're looking at, in addition to the 2 buildings, or 3 buildings rather, that they're talking about putting up on the piece of land today, we talked about another 4 buildings, each of which could potentially have 4 small units. So that would be 16, and they're designed for affordable living. And so they're really starting to see that there is substantial capacity there. Again, we've got servicing issues that we're trying to work our way through, trying to figure out how we're going to get sewer in particular to this one. Water's not a problem. So,
So how many buildings in total are they talking now, then?
well, I mean, it depends on many approvals at different levels of government,
Right,
right? So I don't, right now, we were discussing possibly 7, but this is very early on the new ones that we just met about today. So it's not anything we're gonna hang our hat on, but at least they're thinking that way. They're thinking now about, when they first started off, they weren't even looking at using that lot.
No, I know.
And so now all of a sudden, they are starting to see the potential.
When
of
the
that
CAO
space.
pointed out to them how much acreage they had there, I
Yeah.
think they began to look at it then. So
Where
kudos,
exactly is
kudos
it?
to our CAO for pointing that out to them.
What plot of land are we speaking of?
They have a 8-acre parcel on Temperance Street,
Okay.
and currently have one
Yes.
building
Okay, I know
on
what
it.
you mean now.
And,
Yeah.
you know, they were looking to buy other property and kind of help them understand that they actually had a wealth that they were
Already.
sitting on. Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah, okay. I know
There's
what
a
you
funny
mean.
situation there where sewer runs not on the other side of the road, but on the back side of the lots on the other side of the road, kind of through the hinterlands for
Okay.
reasons that escape me entirely.
Yeah.
And it actually diverges away from the street increasingly as it goes toward Drummond. And it's a bit of a long haul to get down to the manhole in Drummond, and there's also a dip in the road that may challenge gravity flow. So there's a little bit of work to be done, but we're moving through it.
Okay.
Mr. Weirs and I had a meeting with B&L Home Design. They're very interested in the small lots program and are keen to try to do some of the work that they want to do, which again are compact homes. And they're very interested in sustainability, so we're hoping to continue to work with them. They're looking at the lots that were targeted as potentially available, but not all of them are town lots. And so there will be some conversations for them to have with lot owners to see if they're interested with parting with their land. In the discussion on commercial and mixed-use projects, I make a note there that the lack of commercial space downtown is, to me, alarming. Like, we do not have places for businesses to open in our downtown. And so I think that when we talk about strategic planning, we really need to look at that. And the challenge when even if you have new commercial space, that's usually too expensive for startups. They can't afford the per square foot cost of new space. And so the fact that we have very few older buildings which would have the lower rents that could be afforded by, startup entrepreneurs, because they've succumbed to the bulldozer in many cases, is a challenge for us.
Right.
On the planning amendments, we do have, as you're aware, a rezoning application in, and we're in discussion right now about that on Barker's Lane. From some while ago, we've got an application, 2 applications actually, to look at implementing flag lot development in town. There is policy that allows for it. It's just that no one ever did anything in the land use bylaw that allowed for it in residential areas. So that's something that I'm thinking we may include in the major adoption of the current intermunicipal planning strategy and common land use bylaw. When we make that Westville's, we may, I hope, be able to slide in a few more residential improvements that will allow us to consider small lots, small buildings, flag lots, and other opportunities for people to do residential development within the core of the community, where we already have servicing and where walking and cycling is viable. Already mentioned the site plan approval that we have underway right now. Acadia Avenue, you'll recall that council gave as a condition of approving the development agreement on that project. That's 6-building, 24-unit development off Acadia Avenue. That attention be given to the title challenge. And so as the lawyer is looking to migrate the parcels, it seems that we have to do a somewhat unusual process of repealing the early subdivision, which has now been called or suggested is incorrect by 2 surveying companies. And so myself and the lawyer are working our way through how to go about this along with the Registry of Deeds. So I think we have a path that's clear now about how we're going to resolve that.
Okay.
Drummond, the 10 units proposed for just on Drummond over here, I think really, Mr. Weirs, if I'm not mistaken, we're just looking at coming up with a cost-sharing solution on that intersection change. I think that that's kind of the last thing standing in the way of that moving
Yeah,
forward.
and I don't know that, my understanding, I think, is that Shaw will fairly quickly be coming in for building permits for all 10. There is some realignment that needs to happen at the corner, at the intersection of Drummond and Queen, particularly if there is any hope in the future of additional development beyond on what is the coal land, the Pioneer coal lands. If that were to be possible, then the current alignment is chaotic and downright dangerous, I guess. So there probably needs to be some realignment right here where there's I think it's called a slipway onto Drummond, and make it more of a T intersection, a 90-degree intersection. And so those costs would not be all the result of Shaw's development, but a portion of them might be, and I've started discussions with Shaw about how to sort that out. I haven't got a solution yet, but I think there is recognition of both parties that some sharing of costs is possible and makes sense, and so it's kind of figuring out how we do that and when we do that. There probably isn't a huge rush to make those kind of alignment changes to the right of way, largely because Shaw, while they may come forward with request all the building permits at once, they're going to proceed in phases. And the first, my understanding is the first units they're going to put on would be the middle units of that 10-unit row, which keeps it well clear of the slipway and any danger that's there. So I think we have a little bit of time to kind of work through this issue, and I'm completely confident that we'll get there in the fullness of time.
If we looked at the presentation that we had tonight of our active transportation, if we looked at the T intersection that they were proposing for right in front of Needs at that intersection that's not great now, that could tie in as a beautiful win-win for both active transportation and making that safer.
That's
Yeah.
right, yeah.
Just a quick question on, well, two parts. Were we satisfied, there was a preliminary traffic study done by WSP that they spoke of the night that we moved forward the development agreement. Did we get any more on that to satisfy that request? Like, I recall that wasn't quite satisfactory. Like, that was the preliminary report that kind of indicated the similar concerns about, you know, did we get anything final from them from an engineering perspective?
Yeah, there was a final.
There was one,
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
so Shaw produced a WSP, report from WSP that dealt with it.
Perfect.
They identified exactly the same safety concerns that our traffic authority
Right.
did on both ends of the development. So they identified the blind,
Yeah.
curve, and hill, and recommended the same sort of solution there, which is kind of, you know, shaving the knoll, for lack of a better word, and removing some
Yeah.
shrubbery. I don't know if it's shrubbery, but, you know, there's bush there that could be cut down to improve sight lines. And then here at the corner of Drummond and Queen, they also noted the improvement that a 90-degree T would make from a safety perspective.
So the second part being, so that's at one end. The other end would be, Sean had just mentioned about them coming, knocking on the door, looking for the 10 building permits. Are we able in good faith to issue those initial building permits where there's still work to be done to hammer out who's paying for what when it comes to
Yeah.
that intersection?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's, ladies and gentlemen of goodwill on both sides.
Yeah.
And I think we'll, as I said, I'm completely confident that we'll get to an appropriate solution, an equitable solution on both sides.
Perfect. Thank you.
I wonder, Sean, sorry, I wonder if CAO could comment on the high school, the former high school project with the housing cooperative Nova Scotia, because I know that there's been some movement. And I know, I'm sure all of us that were knocking on doors recently, one of the most common questions was, you know, so when is this school thing going to happen? Like, you know, it's sort of like we'll believe it when we see it. So I know that's moved along a little bit. I just wonder.
Yeah, so in the last week or two, we have, we've been able to sign on both sides, both the town and the NSCC, so the Nova Scotia Cooperatives Council, a letter of intent regarding the development of that facility. So it would see the NSCC assuming the building and 3.8 acres, which are all, or essentially all, to the front of the existing school building, which would leave a band of property to be developed, still in the town's ownership, right along the South Main frontage. The letter of intent provides timelines within which the creation of up to 64 units of rental housing will occur. Talks about the creation of an up to 80 space childcare facility. Talks about the land being transferred to NSCC would be inclusive of rights of way, so that the town can at some point in the future, whether it's a long-term care facility or additional residential uses or park uses or whatever, access, the sort of remaining, so we're talking about a 21-acre site, 3.8 acres going away, so 18.7 acres of land left, so that the town will be able to access that. So I'm very excited. I know that NSCC is kind of earlobes deep in discussions with CMHC, their own members, because they are credit unions, so credit unions are their members. So that's, to some degree, they have some self-financing capacity perhaps. So those discussions are underway, as far as I know, proceeding appropriately and apace. They seem very excited, and I know I am. Putting a timeline on the conclusion of those kinds of discussions is kind of a mug's game. There's no way to know how long those take. But I think we're well on the way, and I'm hopeful that activity starts in the coming months.
Yeah, I think it's very optimistic. We can be optimistic now that the actual letter of intent has been signed, and those things are spelled out in the letter, as you said, Scott. And yeah, they're highly motivated and anxious to get going, as much as we are. So I think it's a good partnership, because that's what you want. And so we're anxious to see that sod's being turned. I guess it won't be much sod turning. It'll be more like a demo taking place, right? To start with.
Let's call it reno, not demo.
Well, demo first. Demo first.
Just on that, a couple of other moving pieces on this. I was speaking with the province today, wondering where things stood with respect to the Comprehensive Development District amendment that we submitted, because that's necessary for this to go forward. And they said that, I just found this out this afternoon, we're fourth in line to be reviewed. There's still 4 ahead of us, but they're going to see if they can, give that some more priority. And on that, assuming that, hopefully that will go well, Mr. Weirs and I were speaking today about where I should focus, apart from doing the other stuff, where I should be focusing right now. And I thought it should be on starting a development agreement for that project. Right. And so I'll be turning my mind more to that than some of the other things that I've been working on of late, just to keep that moving so that when they're ready, we'll be ready.
We're ready, yeah.
Perfect.
And it will also unearth, just going through that process of writing a development agreement, unearth questions that need answers. And so that will be helpful in moving forward. I'm going to try to really go fast because it's getting late. On the complaints, I just wanted to mention on one of those, the Victoria Street one, there seems to be effectively an apartment that has been developed in a lower level of a house, and no permits were granted, and there's it's reported that there are children living in or staying in bedrooms that don't have egressible windows, in one case no window at all. And so I only mention this right now in this venue to just suggest it's really very important that people seek permits so that they know that they're doing things the way that they need to be done to protect safety of our community members. And there has now been an order issued for an inspection on that property, which will be happening soon. Had a challenging discussion with someone whose house is sinking into the ground. I don't think because of subsidence, but rather because the house built maybe in the 20s, 100 years ago, had no foundation at all. It's just dirt and wood. And now it's like that wood has become dirt. And so the house is lowering into the ground. And I normally want to save everything, but this is one I think that would be a real challenge to save. I don't know where things have gone at this point. I talked to the province about what they may be able to help with, and I also pointed the person toward a house that was going to be demolished, and I convinced them to at least see if anyone wanted to move it, and they did advertise it for that purpose, and it's very close by, so it would actually be a pretty quick move to this site. But I don't know if, I mean, that's not my job to carry on that ball, but hopefully something will happen there to get this person back in a livable condition. We also had someone asking me about keeping hens and micro ponies. Didn't know there was such a thing as micro ponies, I guess. Really tiny, dog size. Like, why wouldn't you allow that? It was dog size. So right now, we don't have any ability to do that, notwithstanding, you can have stables in the R1, but we can't let someone have hens. So I think that we're going to want to work on that a little
Yeah.
bit.
That comes up often, by the way.
I bet it
That
does.
request.
Sure.
I've heard that
Yeah.
many times.
Well, have you seen the price of eggs lately? So, someone that talked to me or asked about doing development up on Truro Road, lack of servicing in that area kind of put them off that particular property, but I suggested that maybe they could look around the more built-up area where we have services. And the more I got to know the person, I thought, this is someone that I could see us working with on restoring some of these older houses. And I let him know about the John Norman talk that happened recently. And he did attend it, and he was very excited about that. I'm sure, hopefully we'll be talking about that John Norman talk going forward a number of times. So just for those who don't know, John Norman is the mayor of Bonavista in Newfoundland. And they have gone from a town whose primary industry stopped with the cod moratorium altogether. And so all of a sudden, and this town is in the boonies. They are, I think, 3 hours from St. John's, 2 hours from an airport, down in a one-way road, end of the road. So that was a real challenge. And what they had is a lot of old houses that were in poor condition, many of them slated for demolition, and they said, well, hang on, this is a resource. This isn't, something we should be getting rid of. And they, through various mechanisms, have managed to restore a number of these, and now people are moving to Little Bonavista from Toronto. And they have funneled a lot of ACOA money into that community and have, it's a real recommendation for paying attention to your built fabric, your legacy fabric, and not just considering it to be something that needs to be tossed away. I think that's all I needed to talk about on the report. Does anyone have any questions that haven't already been asked?
There's lots going on. I guess the easiest way to sum it up.
Which is great.
Okay, do you want to
Keep
move
trucking.
on to number 8, which is
I would-
the pop-up
Mr.
business?
Chair, I'd move to accept
Oh, yes.
the report as presented.
I'll second that.
Okay, the motion was moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried. Pop-up business space.
Yeah, I'll be quick. Just that we're, with approval and announcement, we're now looking at organizing the builds and those sorts of things. So we're going through that kind of long and laborious process of trying to sort out, all the things that have to happen to put those in place. So that'll happen over the next number of months so that they're ready to go in the spring. So that's about all I've got there. I think, Mr. Day, if I can just continue down the list here,
Absolutely.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Day's
Yes.
touched on the land use bylaw amendments, I think sufficiently, unless anybody's got questions. The Dalhousie school planning project, Council, you'll remember that the 28th, I think, is in your calendar as a date.
Yep.
So, yeah, a week from today. They will be here, and I'm quite excited about and looking forward to what we actually see. Mr. Day and I have been in conversations with them on a kind of bi-weekly basis, I guess, or something like that, maybe every 3 weeks. So we have some sense of where they're going, but we have not seen their final reports, and they seem very engaged and excited, and therefore I am.
This might be something that Ethan might want to watch. I'm just thinking that there's a tie-in between. I don't know what they're going to report, but I'm guessing they're talking about our downtown. They're looking at. I would think that it would be tie-in to active transportation as well.
If council, sorry, you're speaking here, we've already spoken with them. So
Good.
we've had some insight on
Good.
seeing the intro of that work.
Good.
So we have been involved.
Good, good to know.
Good.
But you're welcome to either observe from a distance or attend,
I have to check my calendar
as the
to
case
have-
may be, whatever your availability is. So,
Turns out that Ethan was also a student of the prof that's running this
Oh, wow.
program, so.
Everybody's connected.
oh, this is
that's
Nova
great.
Scotia.
Yeah.
Everybody's connected.
Yeah, it's no.
Just the rezoning request for Churro Road, so just a heads up for next Monday. There'll be a public hearing for that request. So this is moving from rural residential to R2. So that'll happen at that point. Mr. Days told you about the comprehensive development district situation. He's talked about recent planning requests. And so therefore, I'm done, unless anybody has questions.
Any questions?
You're good.
No? Just like grease lightning, isn't it?
But I think like this is just if I like this is what happens sometimes too. Like these conversations just come out organically in your report, right? Because your report is mostly on these things, right? So
Right.
it's good, and I'm glad that we're able to have kind of more of a full discussion as each line item came about, as opposed to the. I don't know if that's the way we're supposed to do it, but I felt it was more organic and natural tonight, the way that
Yeah.
conversation
I agree.
happened.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think there is a right way.
Yeah.
So delegations on issues or discussions arising from business or other business. We've already touched on John Norman talk. Did anybody want to expound on that, or is there anything
Well,
else?
I
in
can
that?
just say a few things. I know that I know the mayor was there, and I believe a former councillor and now loyal opposition.
Deputy mayor.
And the deputy mayor was there, and the development officer was there.
Danielle as well.
Danielle was there too, a current councillor was there. So we were well attended. I think we all came away thinking, wow, if we could bottle some of this and apply it, anoint Westville with it, that would be a good thing. I did have the opportunity a day or two after the talk by Mr. Norman to actually was in a meeting with him, or at an event with him, and had a chance to chat him up a little bit. And the upshot of that was, quite encouraging. I mean, he did reference Westville and say, Westville looks for all the world like Bonavista did in the past. And with some persistence and some commitment and some effort, Westville's downtown could be a different place than it currently is. So, I took some encouragement from that. So we need to, and that kind of going back to, Mayor, your comment about it's all connected, is part of what I'm hoping will come from the planning students next week. Some more kind of thinking about that, some focused thinking that, as a council and as a administration here in Westville, we don't sometimes have the time to put our brains to. So I'm hopeful that that'll come along, and I have in the shadow of the John Norman talk reached out to ACOA on a couple of ideas around things that Westville might be able to do. It's way too soon to talk about them in any detail, but there's some interesting things that we might be able to try and have happen in this town.
I will add a caveat to John Norman's presentation and all the great things that have happened in Bonavista. He's the mayor, but he's also, as I understood it, a landlord, developer / developer has a company that was involved as well as being the mayor. This mayor will not be doing that. I just want to get that on the record.
Just so you know. Okay.
Must have to sit in the gallery a lot.
Yeah.
AAC meetings.
There must be conflict of interest, a lot.
All right, is there a need for an in-camera discussion?
If council would like it, there's no need, but we could do a short one if you're up for it. If you're not, that's fine too. There's nothing important that couldn't
I'm up for it.
happen at a
Is there a
later
need?
date.
We're having
I
time
guess so,
on Monday
yes.
already.
What's that?
One good people in the world, and the rest are right-handed.
Wouldn't have Niven and Robert though.
That's right.
Yeah. We should,
Okay,
I think so.
all right.
Then somebody needs to move to.
We need a
I'll move that we move to in camera.
I'll second it.
Thank you.
moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Those
Aye.
opposed? Motion carried. We are now in camera.
See you.
Welcome to Weston.
Thanks for coming,
Thank you
folks.
so much for coming.